in this thing here. My producer and my director tell me that we're running late, so I've got to make a quick throw to my pre-recorded interview with Josh Frydenberg. Here's Josh Frydenberg. Josh Frydenberg, thanks very much for your company. You wrote an article today in the Herald Sun in Victoria having 10 suggestions on what the Liberals need to do to get their house in order. Were you talking about the federal party that's so down and out in the polls and has been for 9 months, or were you talking about your state colleagues in Victoria who narrowly lost the state election on Saturday?
Well, Peter, as you know, it was a very disappointing result for the Liberal Party in Victoria. It was a good government with a good record, with a decent leader, and it was the first time that a one-term government in Victoria had lost since 1955. I think there were lessons for us both federally and at a state level, particularly the way the Labor Party galvanised the union movement and used the firefighters and the paramedics out there in huge numbers on polling booths, door-knocking houses, and I believe that was breaching a century-old tradition of public service neutrality.
But if I can just jump in, because I don't have a problem with that part of the article. I was more interested in your criticism of them needing to build a narrative, because if ever I've seen a government that has poorly developed a narrative to sell what, in some respects, are not bad policies, it's your government. It's your Prime Minister. You're his Parliamentary Secretary. The narrative around the feds is a shocking one, even though the story is actually not nearly that bad.
Well, you're right. We've got a good story to tell about the budget repair job that we are trying to get underway, about the 3 free trade agreements, about abolishing.
But that's the point. You're not doing it. You're not doing that, but you're lecturing the state Victorians about having got their narrative wrong. Get on and do it yourself, well, I guess, is my point.
Well, that's a fair point. And we know the work that we've got to do over the Christmas break as we go into 2015, because we have an election to fight in 2016, and it's a big job ahead of us, and the electors out there will not indulge a party with an automatic second term. You have to earn it, and that's what we're determined to do. What
did you think about Kevin Andrews? He did a piece suggesting renewal for the Victorian Liberals in the Australian newspaper. He's been in Parliament 23 years. He got returned to the front bench under Tony Abbott. He was dumped by Malcolm Turnbull when he was leader, but here he is with decades of service, getting on in age himself, suggesting that the best thing that the Vics can do is renew.
I thought it was a very good article. I mean, Kevin has a lot of experience, is an important part of Tony Abbott's team here, and he also knows the Victorian division well, and he pointed out some of the very strong performers at the state level in the campaign, and he also pointed out some of the new blood that is coming in.
But he's suggested a course of action that he's not living himself. If he was Josh Frydenberg, maybe someone like your good self, a performer if I might say, wouldn't be languishing in the Parliamentary Secretary ranks, you'd be in the ministry by now.
Look, I'm very happy where I am, and I know that there's a lot of good people in the ministry, and there's a lot of good people on the backbench, and over time those people will get roles, you know, which is just going to come their way over time. But you know, we're not in a rush. In terms of some of us who've got ambition. We are in a marathon, not a sprint, as the Prime Minister likes to say, and I think, you know, we've got the right people in the right job. I'm very happy with that.
Right, I want to get into some of the federal issues in this week of barnacle removal, but before I do, I just want to ask you something quickly about this whole issue in Victoria with the advice, the free advice that you offered in the Herald Sun. This is something I'm interested in. You were a backer, as I understand it, of what was a pretty embarrassing loss for Dennis Napthine in a pre-selection in the seat of Kew. Now, I'm not attacking the person that ultimately won as part of rejuvenation that he did, but Ms Wooldridge, one of his senior ministers, subsequently lost that, and it was egg-on-your-face time for Dennis Napthine, hard to, you know, in a sense, maintain authority. Is that the sort of thing that you would advise that the Victorian Liberals iron out those sort of kinks away from the public eye rather than in the public eye as part of their process of rebuilding?
Oh, well, clearly pre-selections are better fought internally within the party, and there's always going to be various camps. In that case, it was in my area, but you know, I have a great respect for Mary Woolridge, and I have a great respect for Tim Smith, who won that. And there were hundreds of people who had a vote, and it wasn't for me to, you know, to anoint a successor to Andrew McIntosh in Kew. I think the biggest damage, though, to the state party was the disunity that we saw with Jeff Shaw. I mean, he dominated the headlines, Peter, in Victoria, not for weeks, but for months on end. And it was very damaging to the party, and it was a very difficult situation for both Ted Baillieu and Dennis Napthine to deal with.
Just to finish on this article, it was John Howard, your former boss, who coined the phrase that, basically you're a participant, not a commentator. If you're a member of Parliament, you're engaging in commentary in that piece today.
Not at all, because, I have, looked at the situation, come up with some ideas for us going forward, and I'm providing that, those views both publicly and privately. And, it's up to members of Parliament to take a good hard look at a result like this and say we can't repeat those mistakes going forward. We can't sweep this under the carpet. I mean, I think that's one of the messages from my
I agree with that, but you also can't sweep under the carpet the latest news poll for Victoria that has your side of politics down 42 to 58. At least the state Victorian Libs managed to get up to 48 on their TPP.
Oh yeah, and it's very damaging. I mean, even at the last election, Julia Gillard beat us in Victoria despite all the problems in Canberra for her government. So, we have a real situation in Victoria, and we've got to protect, a number of our good members at a federal level who are coming up for re-election, in seats like Corangamite, seats like Deakin, Latrobe, Dunkley, and the like. We must hold on to those seats at the next election. So we've got to sandbag those seats and improve our performance in Victoria ahead of the next election.
Well, you've got to listen to your own advice in that article today for the State Libs and build a better narrative. Let's talk about that. The barnacle removal process. What barnacles have been removed so far? What are yet to come?
Well, obviously the ADF entitlements issue was one that the Prime Minister has dealt with, Peter, in terms of ensuring that some of those entitlements are restored, and we've made our view clear to the Defence Remuneration Tribunal.
And they're not happy about it though, the Defence Force?
Sure.
The personnel?
There will be people who wanted more than that 1.5% increase every year, but in terms of some of those entitlements that were removed, they're now going to be restored, and that was a product of the Prime Minister listening to some of our colleagues and to other people out there, and I think that's a good outcome. Going forward, well, hopefully one of the barnacles that will be dealt with successfully is around higher education. We just got defeated yesterday in the Senate, 33 to 31, but Chris Pyne's doing a fantastic job trying to build the support.
Not with Glenn Lazarus, he's not. We've got to agree on that.
Well, let's watch this space, because we need another two. We've got Madigan, we've got Day, we've got Leonhelm, we've got Muir, and we need another 2 votes. This is, as you have written rightly a number of times, this is an important reform. It's supported widely in the university sector. Chris Pyne has made a number of compromises as a result of his discussions with the independents around the indexation of HECS, as well as setting up a Commonwealth Scholarship Fund, in terms of also a rural adjustment scheme and other systems that we are now putting in place to ensure a fairer outcome for students as a result of these changes.
Is one of the barnacles that you've got to get rid of David Johnson, the Defence Minister? How can he preside over submarines which go underwater and hopefully come back up afterwards when he doesn't have enough faith in the organisation that services them to even build a canoe?
Well, as he has said publicly, his comments last week were a bit of a rhetorical flourish and probably better not said. But we have moved on from that. He is, by all accounts, a very strong minister and somebody who knows his portfolio well, someone who's passionate about it. And, I look forward to supporting him in that role going forward.
So you'd be blown away if in a reshuffle he was either shuffled out altogether or shuffled into another portfolio?
Well, you're there asking me to say there's going to be a reshuffle, and there's no indication that there is going to be one, Peter, and I would be surprised if David didn't keep his job. I really do hope that he does.
All right, we'll see on that. I want to ask you one last question before I let you go. The Prime Minister this week, including in that media conference to start the week, all but acknowledged that he's broken promises, namely in respect to the ABC. He didn't utter the words as such. Are you able to do so? Can you get it out of your system? that a promise was broken from the election. We can argue about whether it needed to or not, and we can discuss that it's not a bad thing. I myself wrote on the weekend that the ABC could be a hell of a lot more efficient than it is. But do you concede that that was a broken promise?
I concede that the position that we have adopted was different to what the Prime Minister had said prior to the last election, but I do believe it's the right decision.
So it is a broken promise, but it's a good promise to break.
Well, I concede that our budgetary position has left us in a situation where we need to find savings across the board, and there's no better example than the last budget that Wayne Swan delivered at $18 billion worth of debt, rising to now it's
and I hear all of that, but does that mean you're saying yes, it was a broken promise?
I'm saying that we needed to make these savings in the ABC together with across government, and there will be more savings to come, Peter, because of the state of the budget, particularly the fall in revenue that's resulted out of the lower natural resources prices that we're seeing, particularly in iron ore.
So you
we're
therefore
going to have to make some real changes.
So therefore you had to break the promise on the ABC.
I'm saying that we have to make savings across the board, and sometimes that will be different to what we have said earlier, but if we can explain that context, I think the Australian people
will understand that you had to break the promise.
And I think they will understand that we have to make savings as a result of our changed financial and fiscal environment.
Because of a broken promise.
You're saying because of a broken promise. I'm saying because of a changed fiscal environment, we are having to make changes to the policy positions that we are now putting forward.
Which represents a broken promise.
How many times do you want to do it?
I think this will be the last.
I'm going to say, that our fiscal environment has changed, and that result means we have to recalibrate some of our policy decisions, and that has meant around the ABC there are savings that we have had to fund.
All right, I don't know how you do it, and I'm talking to all politicians when I say that. Josh Frydenberg, I appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Great to be with you, Peter.